Hey guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Becca and today I have a loose TBR for the Asian Readathon. You guys have heard me say before that I really like to read East Asian fantasy, and as next month is the Asian Pacific American Heritage Month and the Asian Readathon is also going on, I thought I would share some of the books that I plan to read in May. Now this isn't a normal TBR because, as you guys know, I have Bookopoly, which I do every month, and those are my priority reads. So this is going to be a very loose TBR. I'm pretty much going to show you everything that I own from East Asian authors, and when I film my Bookopoly, I'm going to try and fit as many of these in my TBR as possible. Aside from that, when I have finished my Bookopoly reads for the month, I will then just continue to mood read through this stack of books that I'm about to show you today. As I said, I've pretty much pulled every book by an East Asian author that I own. However, it is very likely that I have missed some, and as well as that, I only pulled books from authors that are East Asian. Now I believe that the Asian Readathon encompasses all of Asia, so South Asia as well, but I'm focusing on East Asia for this readathon. The Asian Readathon is predominantly created by Cindy from Read with Cindy, so I will put the link to her announcement video down below, and there is a Google Doc in the description box of her video if you would like any information. I'm not going to focus on the challenges for the readathon here today because, like I said, it really depends on what happens with Bookopoly, but I have split these into ethnicity, as the twist for the Asian Readathon is that every book you read should be by an author or following characters of a different ethnicity. Now that I've said all that, I'll pretty much just get into it. I'm going to start with the ethnicity that I have the least amount of books for, and then we'll go into Japan because I got a whole ton of those ones. So the only book I have for Korea is The Girl King by Mimi Yu, and this is an adult fantasy. I believe it was released in 2019, that follows two girls who are the princesses of this empire. One of these girls is the heir to the emperor and will eventually become the empress of this kingdom, and the other one is destined to forever live in her shadow. However, one day the emperor declares that their male cousin instead is going to become the ruler of this empire, and the sister that never intended to become the empress now has to marry the future emperor. I'm really excited for this. Obviously I like East Asian fantasy. I don't need to say that a million times in this video because it's kind of obvious, but this is a really anticipated 2019 release for me. It is kind of chunky and I don't know what to expect from the plot, but I'm pretty hyped to read this. We'll see if I get to it in May though, because it is quite big and I do have to read the first part of Storm of Swords. Next we have the only book I have for Malaysia, and that is The Elites by Natasha Neon. This, I believe this is her first published book. She's published a few. You guys probably know her for Girls of Paper and Fire, which was released last year. This one was released in 2013, and I've had this on my shelf for a very long time. So I believe that this is a dystopia, and it follows a girl who lives in the only city that survived the apocalypse, essentially, and for some reason or another she has to venture outside of that city and learn how to deal outside of the safe environment that she's grown up in. I don't know what to expect from this because literally I don't think anybody who I watch has read this, so I've heard no reviews, but I really liked Girls of Paper and Fire, so I'm hoping I will like this one as well. I have two for China, and the first one is Warcross by Marie Lu. This is a young adult virtual reality science fiction that follows a hacker called Amika Chen, who I think accidentally glitches herself into the World Warcross tournament. From there she is employed by the billionaire creator of Warcross, and I'm guessing there's some sort of shifty maneuverings going on behind the scenes. Kind of excited to get to this, kind of not. I've read Batman Nightwalker by Marie Lu and I didn't love it, but I really love virtual reality sci-fi, so hopefully this one will be a hit. The only other book that I have for China also segues really nicely into Japan, and that is Monstrous by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda. I believe that Marjorie Liu is biracial. I think she's half Chinese and Sana Takeda is Japanese, so that would apply for both. So this graphic novel series follows our main character, who is depicted on the front, and I think that this takes place in a steampunk alternate history world, and while the synopsis of this does not really allude to the plot very much, I do believe that our main character is harboring a monster inside of her. I've heard absolutely great things about this, so I am excited to read it. I just always put off graphic novels because I read them really quickly and I can't afford to keep buying the next installments. Okay, everything else is from Japan, and the first one is a manga, and that is Death Note Volume 1 by Tsugumi Oba and Takeshi Obata. This is a very popular manga. I have watched about half of one of the adaptations of it, but it was subtitled and it was on at like 1 in the morning and I fell asleep. But this follows a boy or a man who finds a notebook and quickly discovers that if he writes a name in the notebook, that person will later turn up dead. My only other manga is Resident Evil, The Mahawa Desire, and this is by Naoki Sarazawa, and the concept is obviously by Capcom. Resident Evil is a big Japanese video game franchise, which I really love. I bought this because as I'm not too familiar with manga, I've only ever read one, I wanted to purchase one in a world that I'm already familiar with, so I wouldn't be too thrown if I was distracted by the format of this. This one, I'm not sure whether it's good or not because it's kind of like the equivalent of a movie novelization, but I do like the Resident Evil world and I just thought it would be a good gateway for me into manga. This one I probably know the least about, and I bought it pretty much exclusively because I enjoy East Asian stories, but that is Cloud of Sparrows by Takashi Matsuoka. I'm not really sure whether this is a historical fiction or a fantasy or a magical realism, but this follows two people, I believe they are Americans, who are traveling to Japan when the East has only just reopened its gates to the West. Both of them have arrived to escape something, and that's pretty much the extent of my knowledge about this one. 6-4 by Hideo Yokiyami is a adult thriller, and this follows a young girl who went missing in Japan in 1989, and essentially investigators and police could not find any trace of her, but many years later a new investigator comes on the case and believes that he can crack it and reopens the case of this missing girl. This is outside of my comfort zone because I like thrillers, but I don't necessarily like anything to do with crime. Pretty much picked this up because I know that Hideo Yokiyama is a pretty well esteemed author, and I know a few people have said that this is good, but I don't like crime, so we'll see how I feel about it. And then my last 4 are all by the same author, who is one of my favorite Japanese authors, and that is Haruki Murakami. I'm pretty much just going to reel off the titles of these because I like to go into Haruki Murakami's books blind. He writes magical realism, but very much rooted in the mundane. So one of my favorite books by him is The Wind Up Bird Chronicle, where you just follow a guy who's lost a cat and then his wife goes missing, and you follow his day-to-day routine, and then really weird stuff starts happening. So I like to go into them blind, but I also find like the plot is not easily summarized. So the first one I have is A Wild Sheep Chase. I also have Norwegian Wood. I think this one is a man's story of his first love, and Norwegian Wood is a reference to the Beatles. The one I know the least about is Colorless Tsukuru Tazaki and His Years of Pilgrimage. And then the one that I'm most excited to read, and I've been desperate to read this, but it's enormous and in 3 parts, is 1Q84. And I believe that this is less magical realism and more fantasy or dystopian and science fiction, which is why I'm the most interested in it. But this is just the first 2 parts of it. There is an extra part, so this is like, it's enormous. But those are all the books that I will be sifting through during the month of May for the Asian Readathon and Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. Please let me know if you are taking part, or if you're taking part casually like I am and just reading Asian literature in honor of the month. But that is it from me today, guys. Please don't forget to like this video if you liked it and subscribe if you want to. If you head into my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, Instagram and Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as a link to my Bookish body butter and candle website, the Instagram for that, and 10% off discount code. But that's it from me today. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you will go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.